The Don Wood Foundation is playing an integral role in helping develop Northeast Indiana's talent. Laura Macknick with the foundation is here to tell us about it on the Midwest Flourish. Greetings, I'm Rick Farrant, and I'm your host for the Midwest Flourish. Our guest today is Laura Macknick, President and CEO of the Don Wood Foundation, one of the largest philanthropic foundations in Northeast Indiana. Welcome, Laura.
Well, thank you for having me, Rick. I'm pleased to be here.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to have you. Let's just start the easy way and just tell us a little bit about the Don Wood Foundation, what it does generally, and the man behind the namesake of the foundation. Yeah.
So the Don Wood Foundation was founded about 8 years ago by Don Wood. He was a salesman, very passionate about sales, entrepreneurship, and manufacturing. And he had a vision for seeing his philanthropy affect the region and really pour into workforce development. And so our foundation really focuses on what we call next-gen manufacturing workforce talent development here in Northeast Indiana.
Yeah, and we'll get into the next gen thing. But he was also the founder of 80/20, right? In Columbia City.
He was the founder of 80/20 Inc., and it's one of the largest employers in Whitley County today.
Yeah, and I know you know this. Someone asked anyway. And 80/20 does what? It makes these. What do they call that?
They call it aluminum extrusion. So it's T-slotted aluminum extrusion that doesn't require a weld. So you can use different parts to build basically like an industrial erector set.
That's what I was looking for was the erector set.
That's what
reference.
Don used to explain his product to sell it to others, and all of his vendors and suppliers.
So the foundation has traditionally focused on manufacturing pretty heavily. And you just announced recently that you're going to invest $50 million in training for the next-gen manufacturing workforce. I know some of the focus will be on developing soft skills, realigning education into growing employer-led training, but talk about some of those and other elements of it and really what you hope to accomplish with that.
Certainly. So I think at the root of it, Rick, Don believed in lifelong learning. He understood, and he often had these sayings. We refer them to as the Donisms, and he often would say things like, pack your own chute, and he believed in knowledge that you bring in can never be taken from you. And so I think his vision for the foundation was, how do we embed lifelong learning, including those technical proficiencies and those soft skill development into workforce development and education for our students in Northeast Indiana.
Yeah, and two questions.
Sure.
But I guess the first one is, What makes this different from what Don Wood has already done in the manufacturing space? Is it just that it's a larger initiative, that more money is being pumped into it, or has something changed?
So our board did strategic planning in the fall and emerged with a revitalized mission, and we were really interested in where is manufacturing going for Northeast Indiana, and we were having deep conversations around the integration of AI, automation, coding, cybersecurity, and all of those really fundamentally key roles that we understand are going to change and alter the skills needed in the workforce, particularly in manufacturing. And so it is a larger initiative in that we are looking to pour more funds into several of our emerging grant programs around advancing that next gen of manufacturing. And by that, we're talking about those automation and AI and those other kind of components.
Right, so it would be two things. It's more money.
Right.
But you're also looking at some of the things that are really changing the landscape for manufacturing, some of those technological advances.
Absolutely, Rick. And we're beginning to think about this from the perspective of, in the first 8 years of the foundation, we've talked about really growing what we call the supply side, not to commoditize human beings, but thinking about, if we're pouring into education and we're pouring into workforce development, that's the supply side of the equation. Now we're actually also beginning to have conversations about how do we augment and help bolster and grow the demand side. And to that, we've begun to think about how do we ensure, Rick, that if these students emerge with these heightened technical proficiencies and these foundational soft skills, and they're, going to be exemplary employees in Northeast Indiana. If we haven't prepared industry for them, they'll leave. And they'll find those jobs elsewhere. So we need to be thinking about how do we bring along industry at the same time we're bringing along educators.
Yeah, so manufacturing is the number one employing industry in Northeast Indiana. Probably looks like it will be for some time to come.
Sure.
From your perspective, or from the foundation's perspective, what does the future look like for manufacturing in Northeast Indiana?
I think there's a tremendous opportunity in Northeast Indiana, and I think the time is right. One of the other things that the Don Wood Foundation really wants to accomplish with this initiative is to really begin to build a stronger ecosystem around the manufacturing, because right now you have education that exists in one capacity, you have industry in another, but a lot of times those two are not talking to one another. And so we recognize and we understand that the work of intermediary organizations to help bridge those gaps is going to be crucial. And to that end, we recognize that you have to build that as an ecosystem. It can't just be a tool or something that you bring in, like a LinkedIn for manufacturing in Northeast Indiana, or a digital tool or of something of those nature. We have to build the relationships between educators and industry. And right now, that's a gap.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump ahead here on some of the questions, the order I think that I was going to ask it, because you have some other initiatives, and we're going to talk about those. I think one of the unique things, I think it's relatively unique about the Don Wood Foundation is it appears as if it is significantly more involved in serving as a convener. The old model for a foundation was, we have a bunch of things that we want you to do. If you meet the requirements, we'll hand a check over to you. But you have become really involved in this initiative and other initiatives in convening, in bringing together all of the groups. Talk a little bit about that.
That is an honor to Don Wood. Don believed in investing time with people. Don believed in relationship building. It's one of the reasons he was so incredibly successful at 80/20. And so we've looked at how do we operationalize that at the foundation. And we started thinking about it, Rick, and we realized, yes, we can provide grant checks, but there's support that we can bring to our partners in the community that go beyond the check. And to that, convening is one of those strategic tools in our tool belt. We recognize that we come with a neutral agenda in the standpoint that our goal is to just try to bring disparate parties together. And we can do that because we're not looking to hire from the workforce pool, so we don't have a competitive element with industry. We're not looking to do the actual education, so it's not a competitive element with the educators. And I think that's one reason why it's been successful so far to do this convening work. That's not the only tool that we use. Beyond our grant making and our strategic convening, we do a lot of storytelling and a lot of strategic communications that are really intended to lift the story of our grant partners and tell their stories. Because a lot of times these are maybe smaller nonprofits or schools. They don't have those resources to do that themselves. And so we recognize that convening can be one tool, communications and storytelling can be another, and then certainly providing financial resources. I'd say another way that we provide resources that is non-monetary is we really believe in linking and bridging gaps. And that's part of the convening, but it goes a step further, because when we learn about programs or projects that could be complementary, we're in a really unique position to be able to make those introductions between, one organization and another in order to see that work amplified.
Well, I've had a couple of conversations with Patrick Bushing of the foundation, sort of along these lines, and one is and this may be kind of an amoeba, it may be difficult to answer, but I always wondered where the foundation stops being, where it draws the line so that it is not actually doing the work, or whether it is meddling too much in the work that is being done or that is going to be done. Now, how do you do that? How do you draw that line?
That's a fantastic question. One of the things that we often talk about in the Don Wood Foundation when we're reviewing grant proposals and we're looking at the stages of diligence to ensure that everything's in alignment with our donor intent, that the organization has capacity to carry out what they are proposing that they want to accomplish. Those are some of the key things that we're looking at. But we also recognize that we're not program designers, so we often have questions and we approach things from curiosity. We ask a lot of questions, and we often will talk with grant partners and say things like, I wonder if a conversation between your organization and this other organization could be fruitful because you're doing this one element that would be really complementary to this other component that Group B is doing.
Yeah, and I don't want to belabor this, but it's interesting because I was in workforce development for a number of years, and I'm very familiar with your foundation as well as others. But there is a line there, and sometimes it kind of gets a little blurry because a foundation does have views, right?
Sure.
In fact, they sort of have to have views when they're going to take a look at grants. They have to kind of know the landscape so that they know whether whatever is being proposed makes sense or whether it aligns with other initiatives or aligns with employer needs or whatever it happens to be. So those views do get imparted sometimes, right?
Sure.
And that's why I'm talking about the line. And it would seem to me that somebody that's just been given a really large grant, if somebody from, say, Foundation A, we won't pick on your foundation, said, geez, I think it would be a really good idea to whatever, and the person who has received the money obviously is going to jump on that.
Yes, that's an accurate statement. And so one of the things that we're conscientious about is we don't want to see organizations experience mission drift, because we have a very laser point focus on what we're looking to accomplish with Don Wood's philanthropy and with his legacy funds that he has entrusted us to steward to his will and intentions. And so we recognize that we may be able to guide conversation, but we also have to be very careful because when we put, wonderment statements out there or suggestions out there, naturally a grant partner is going to hear that as, oh, if I have an opportunity to do this, then I'm going to be able to receive funding from the Don Wood Foundation. So we're very conscientious to say, we are not program designers. You're the content expert. You're the one that has the ability to craft and build a program that's going to deliver the outcomes that you're proposing you want to deliver. And so that's one of the ways that we do that is try to just not make too many suggestions about programmatic elements. And instead, when our grant committee and our board of trustees reviews proposals, they usually come back with questions rather than statements of if this were to meet a different criteria, then it would be successfully funded.
Yeah. Now, having put you on the hot seat with those questions of drawing the line, I have talked to a number of foundations in the last 3 or 4 years and suggested, in fact, that foundations maybe needed to play a little more of an active part other than just doling out money. So I am very supportive of that. I just want to go on record as saying that.
Sure.
Before we get off of manufacturing, what do people, manufacturing, I think we've made a lot of headway in selling manufacturing as a good occupation and throwing out some of the myths that people have about, it's dirty or all the, I don't want to go into all the myths. But for a person thinking of going into manufacturing, what do they need to know and how do they need to prepare in this 21st century economy?
I think it depends on whether you're talking about the individual that's going to be entering the profession of manufacturing or whether you're talking about the support system around that individual. Because what are some of our anecdotal evidence reflects is that parents have a very different perception of what manufacturing is and whether it would be appropriate for their children to pursue careers in that field than maybe even some of the emerging students. And the other thing that we're learning is language really matters. So when you're able to refer to these as jobs that are high tech, that are in the STEM field, that include robotics, the current generation emerging from, the high school gets really excited about that. It's parents in many cases, or educators maybe that are a generation removed, that still maybe have some of those misconceptions about what manufacturing is and what it really isn't.
Yeah, yeah. Let's move to another initiative, because this initiative actually goes beyond manufacturing, which I find kind of interesting. That's sort of a little different approach, and that's the Learn More, Earn More initiative, which kind of got its start in the fall, and now is gearing up for a full court press, as it were. Talk a little bit about that initiative.
So, for context, I must share that emerged because the Don Wood Foundation partnered with Questa Education Foundation on our Advancing Post-Secondary Education and Training research report. And in that report, we discovered what the delta was going to be in terms of how many baccalaureate degrees we were going to need in engineering fields and in other fields too. It looked at the entire ecosystem of workforce for Northeast Indiana. When we did that report, Rick, we realized this is bigger than just putting a report on a shelf. We need to bring the community around this issue. And from there emerged what is now today the Learn More, Earn More Coalition. And that coalition is comprised of educators, industry partners, workforce development, economic development leaders, community leaders, public officials. And so really, we've been able to bring together many different people to begin looking at this, because it's a comprehensive issue. When we begin looking at why are students not attaining these either credentials or additional degrees after graduating from high school, we recognize that it's convoluted. It could be a transportation barrier. It could be they don't know where to begin. They don't know how to look for the funding for the educational attainment they want to seek, or that they don't have a support network. And so that's why we built out such a large coalition, because we wanted to have representation from others even doing work in, for instance, like mental health, wellness and space, because that can be a deterrent for students. And so the coalition has actually gone much broader than just manufacturing, and really has begun to look at educational attainment for Northeast Indiana.
Yeah, and I think one of the terms that's been used is learning beyond high school, which is a simple way of looking at it. What are some of the pieces of it now, or some of the pieces of that initiative coming down the pike? So
we have three kind of main core elements of the Learn More, Earn More Coalition. First is our annual summit. We do an annual summit in the fall around education. This year we'll be partnering with others from educational service organizations in order to put together some of the educational resources they want to bring to the conversation. And then we're also talking about how do we get more industry partners to come and be a part of this summit as well. So that's one component of the Learn More, Earn More Coalition, and that happens in the fall. Another element is absolutely this marketing and awareness around what resources exist for a student that really wants to find a way to earn more, learn more, right? How do they find some of the financial aid? How do they look for a resource around covering their books or their tech fees? And so, sometimes it can be beyond just a tuition scholarship. It can be broader than that. And so the marketing and awareness campaign, to come back around to that, is looking at how do we highlight those resources and how do we really begin to change and drive behaviors that look like people are embracing the idea of, I need to be a lifelong learner.
Yeah, and you are going to have some tools, right? Actually, there's at least one tool that exists now, and that's through Questa, right?
Correct.
So what are the tools that?
So there's two tools that we're really working with. One is under Questa Education Foundation's guys, that they are working with Compass finder. And what it is it's a comprehensive database and search around what kind of financial aid, scholarships, and forgivable loans exist in Northeast Indiana for students, both traditional learners as well as adult learners. And so we're looking at how do we bring those resources to two very different populations that have two very distinct sets of needs when they're thinking about pursuing additional education or attaining a credential or something of that nature. So that's one of the tools. The other tool is a data dashboard, because it's really fundamentally important, we believe, to know what is the baseline in Northeast Indiana. How will we know if we've made a difference in 5 years or 10 years if we don't measure now what's happening with that attainment and continue to bring together the data that can come out of higher education, the data that can come out of K through 12 education, information that can come from industry. If we can figure out a way to bring all of that together as part of a dashboard, it becomes a tool that everybody can use.
So those would be, one of the questions I was going to have is how do you measure the success of these initiatives? So in the case of Learn More, Earn More, one of it is, what kind of actions were taken? Right. Did X number or X percentage of people actually get certifications?
Right.
Or did they seek a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree or some kind of, short-term training after high school? Hopefully, if you can track the numbers, you can say, well, maybe we're having an impact. It's always hard to determine whether one initiative, right? Whether one initiative is responsible for any kind of significant improvement in the data. But I do think, I've told other people this, it's safe to say that if you're out there and if you're spreading the message and you're doing it in a big way, one can assume that you at least helped push the needle. There are other factors, right? So that would be for Learn More, Earn More. How are you going to measure success in manufacturing? You're not necessarily doing the same thing with that you are with Learn More. So what kinds of things are you going to look at to say, oh, this $50 million that we've invested has helped lead to this?
So we've talked a lot about looking at the jobs in each of those respective counties. And so, we've done some recent research in collaboration with Purdue Fort Wayne and the Community Research Institute. And we've learned from those white papers that, a lot of the manufacturers that are in this region, 73%, in fact, of manufacturers in this region have less than 50 employees, and 21% have less than 5 employees. So you're talking about predominantly small to mid-size manufacturing operations. These are organizations that don't have slack time. They don't have, they may have a person that's wearing 3 or 4 different hats as part of their role. So how do we help bridge that gap in terms of understanding whether they're receiving the talent that they need? So we've talked about, can we measure the job growth? Can we look at, and we know that would be an indirect effect, right? We can't take direct credit for something along those lines, but we can hope that the marketing and communications efforts that we're doing, that the funds that we're infusing into the ecosystem, that those are going to be a direct influence towards seeing a growth in those high skill, high demand, and high paying jobs in manufacturing.
So even if you don't have the same kind of data dashboard, you're still going to look at obviously at data to try and determine whether there's been some kind of change. And how long is this $50 million initiative? And then the $1 million question is, how long is Learn More, Earn More? How long are these things going to go?
So the $50 million initiative is our strategic plan between now and 2030. So that gives you an idea of what we're looking to infuse in the next 5 years. But realistically, we are entrusted with funds that allow us to bring multiple millions of dollars, and we purposely channel it into Northeast Indiana. Don Wood did not leave that as a requirement. It's our trustees that have strategically decided it makes sense to invest these funds where Don lived, worked, and played, and where he called home.
Yeah, would he be happy with that?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
He'd be happy with that decision.
I think so. Even though he didn't put that in the will and what he wanted to accomplish, we think that's part of what he was.
Part of what he would want. So how about Learn More, Earn More?
So with Learn More, Earn More, Don Wood Foundation is absolutely committed to the next 5 years of putting up the support that's needed for the initiatives that came out of the coalition, the recommendations for the marketing and communications efforts. But we've grown a leadership council for the Learn More, Earn More, and that leadership council is comprised of not just Don Wood Foundation, but other higher education leaders, other K through 12 education leaders, and a few other funders. And so the thought and the hope is that, as this takes and grows momentum, it will bring others from the community and really transition into being a community asset, even with that backbone support of Don Wood Foundation. So it's not about, Don Wood Foundation in big letters and then Learn More, Earn More. We see it the complete opposite way. It's Learn More, Earn More as a community asset here in this little print down here, powered by Don Wood Foundation.
Yeah, and you've actually done that with a lot of things where, which I find really interesting in a way, because Don Wood does play such an important part. So how did you get to the point of it's okay if you take a second seat or a third seat or a fourth seat, or maybe be completely invisible?
I think it's a nod to. I think it's a nod to what Don wanted, but in many ways, he was an interesting individual. I knew him. He was very charismatic. He in one moment might have really been excited about the opportunity to be at the forefront, and in another moment was perfectly fine with the idea of quietly being a supporter in the background. And so we recognize that this approach, either being in the front seat or being in the, behind the scenes, either way, it's still accomplishing the end result, or we believe we're moving towards accomplishing that end result that he wanted to see be effective in the region.
In the 5 minutes we have left, I got about 3 questions that I want to address. But one, we don't have to spend a lot of time. We've talked about 2 really large initiatives, but actually Don Wood funds a lot of smaller things, camps, various others. What are some of the other things that are funded?
So we also fund our Camps, Clubs, and Competitions program, which is really popular with schools and smaller nonprofits. It's an opportunity to do smaller grant awards, and they tend to post quicker. So that's responsive to the schools and the robotics teams and Lego leagues, entrepreneurial pitch competitions. Those are the kind of things, STEAM camps. We're seeing a lot of those activities really manifest in Northeast Indiana, and more organizations are looking to embed STEAM elements into the programming that they deliver to our students. And we look at that as wide exposure at an early age is a win for everybody.
Yeah.
Because it could spark the interest in that young mind for a career in robotics or a career in engineering, or you just don't know, but you have to give them an opportunity to do a lot of hands-on tactile learning at that age.
Biggest challenges that a philanthropic organization faces these days?
I would say one of the bigger challenges is how to bring all of the key parties together, because philanthropy is only a piece of the solution. You've got private, you've got the public sector, and you've got philanthropy, or the nonprofit sector. And so one of the larger challenges that we face as a private foundation, we cannot lobby legally, or we could lose our charter as a private foundation. But yet we want to inform and educate our legislation on the research that's coming out and around educational attainment. And so we walk a very careful line to make sure that we're informing, but we're not trying to influence.
But you're not pushing, right?
Right.
So the information, when you do like that, whatever it was, 165-page report that you're referring to, legislators got that.
Right.
But there was no recommendation or push or anything else. It was just, here's a piece of information.
Here's some information about what's happening around educational attainment in Northeast Indiana.
Yeah.
And we just palms up, publish it, and say it can be widely used by everybody.
There you go. So you have a long history in philanthropy, and I'm including academic study. I'm going to guess that when you were a little girl growing up, you weren't saying, "Oh, I want to be a philanthropist," or am I wrong?
You are spot on.
Okay.
You
Well,
are
by the way,
spot
what
on.
did you want to be when you were
I wanted to be an attorney.
yay, this small?
When I was really young, I wanted to be an attorney.
Aha.
And I had an opportunity to intern in a law firm and realize that it would not be the right career path for me. I love working with people. And so my first position out of college was an opportunity to work in a small nonprofit doing development work, which I absolutely loved doing. And then the rest of my history has only been in the nonprofit sector. I've worked primarily in higher education, but in technical education specifically. And I would say, what influenced me was it was a calling for me. Once I realized that I was working in the nonprofit sector and that the work that I was doing was really, a tide that lifts all ships, that filled my cup. And I realized I belong in the nonprofit sector. And that's what encouraged me to pursue my master's degree from the IU Lilly School of Philanthropy, and also have begun working on a Phil D program through IU Lilly Family School of Philanthropy as well.
So there are lots of ways to influence, right? And there are people that influence without money. We have tons of influencers out there that lift people up or lift organizations up. What was it about being on the money side of it as opposed to being a mentor or whatever that really appealed to you?
I think what appealed to me the most was when the opportunity came to help start the foundation. I've been involved with the foundation since the very beginning. I felt a sense of wanting to honor Don. I knew him well enough. I had worked with him on an endowed scholarship at Ivy Tech, where he still has an endowed scholarship. And I knew that he had, a vision for his philanthropy. And I really felt like with my academic background and my experiences in technical education, it was less about the money, Rick, and it was a whole lot more about, could I help make sure his vision is truly seen through?
Yeah. Listen, it's been wonderful having you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a wrap on today's episode of the Midwest Flourish podcast. Want to dig deeper or get involved? Head to marketingthemidwest.com to explore how we can work together to empower your community to flourish. Let's keep the Midwest momentum going and shape the future of our region together.